Or you ever notice how the moment you stop chasing someone, that's when they suddenly start noticing your absence? See, here's the thing. When you walked away, it wasn't a dramatic exit. You didn't slam doors. You didn't write paragraphs begging him to understand. You just chose peace. And now, he's left sitting with the only things he has left in his ego and his regret. But don't confuse his regret for growth. And don't confuse your peace for loneliness. This is where the real shift happens. And it's more powerful than any closure he could have ever given you. You walked away with your dignity, not just your heart. That's something people don't always talk about. How hard it is to leave a relationship not when things are bad on the surface, but when they're quietly breaking you on the inside. You didn't leave because it was easy. You left because staying was starting to cost you your self-worth. There's a moment where you realize that love alone isn't enough. That connection, chemistry, history, none of it matters if you're the only one doing the emotional heavy lifting. You gave him chance after chance. You communicated, compromised, forgave, and stretched yourself to meet him where he was, even when he barely moved to meet you. And for a while, you convinced yourself that being understanding was the same as being loved. But love without action is just words. It's empty promises dressed up as potential. And the person who truly values you doesn't make you beg for basic respect, presence, or emotional safety. They show up, not just when it's convenient or when they're afraid of losing you, but consistently, even in the quiet, ordinary moments. But he didn't. He took your loyalty for granted. He assumed that because you stayed through the last argument, the last silent treatment, the last dismissive comment, that you'd always stay. And maybe for a long time you did. You stayed because you believed in who he could be. You stayed because you saw the good in him. You stayed because deep down, you were hoping he'd finally rise to the love you were giving him. But the longer you stayed, the more you lost parts of yourself. You found yourself shrinking, second-guessing, over-explaining, trying to earn love that should have been freely given. And one day, you just couldn't do it anymore. So you left, not with bitterness or drama, but with clarity. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to win. You just needed peace. And leaving wasn't about punishing him. It was about saving yourself. It was about recognizing that love should feel safe, not like survival. That your heart isn't a prize someone wins by doing the bare minimum. That your needs, your boundaries, and your voice deserve space. He may not get it. In fact, his ego probably tells him you were just being too sensitive or wasking for too much. But deep down, a part of him knows. He knows he lost someone rare. Someone who loved deeply, who showed up, who truly cared. And now, while he's replaying old conversations in his head, maybe wishing he had handled things differently, you're not sitting in regret. You're healing. You're reconnecting with the parts of yourself you had to abandon in that relationship. You're remembering that love isn't supposed to hurt more than it heals. What he's left with is the weight of his own actions, or lack thereof. But what you walk away with is so much more valuable: your self-respect. You didn't lose. You choose. You chose peace over chaos, truth over illusion, and yourself over the version of love that made you forget who you are. That's not weakness. That's power. That's dignity. And in the end, that's what sets you free. He clings to his ego because that's all he has left. After you walked away, after you stopped reaching out, stopped explaining yourself, stopped trying to fix things he never really wanted to fix, he was left not with love, not with connection, but with the bruised echo of his own pride. And here's what most people won't admit: it's easier for someone like him to protect their ego than to face the truth of what they lost. Accountability would require him to admit that he had something truly valuable and didn't show up for it. And that's a hard truth to sit with. So instead, he rewrites the story. In his mind, you were too emotional, too demanding, too quick to walk away. Maybe he tells himself you overacted or expected too much. Why? Because accepting the truth, that he didn't do enough, that he let someone who loved him slip through his fingers, would require a level of humility he's not ready to confront. Ego is a shield, and he hides behind it because it's safer than feeling regret. But safety doesn't bring peace. It just prolongs the denial. He might be out there acting unbothered, laughing, posting, pretending he's fine. But ego is loud when the heart is quietly aching. That performance is not confidence. It's cover. It's distraction. Because when the lights are off, when the noise fades, when no one's around to impress, what's left? Silence, regret, the weight of knowing he didn't rise to the occasion when it mattered. And he knows it. He may not say it out loud. Men like this often don't. But it shows in the way he watches your stories, the way he lingers on your name, the way he brings you up in conversations pretending not to care. There's a part of him that knows he let his pride win. He won the argument, but lost the person. And now that pride is all he has. No partnership, no growth, no one who truly saw him and still chose to love him. Just ego and regret. The most ironic part, he likely still thinks about you. Not because he's changed, but because your absence exposes everything he refused to face when you were there. Your love was a mirror. It showed him his potential, his flaws, his capacity to be better. And now that mirror is gone, he's left with the version of himself he chose to be instead of the one he could have become with you. That's not something ego can protect him from forever. But while he clings to pride, you're outgrowing pain. You're choosing healing over history. You're choosing truth over attachment. And that contrast is what hurts the most. He thought you'd always be an option, that you'd orbit his life, no matter how little effort he gave. But now he's realizing that love with conditions doesn't last. And you were never going to keep fighting to be seen while he hid behind his defenses. Ego may help him feel strong for a moment, but it won't hold his hand when he's lonely. It won't comfort him when he thinks about what could have been. And eventually, it will turn cold. Because ego doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't build connection. It doesn't grow. It just deflects, denies, and delays the truth. And the truth is simple. He had someone who showed up with love, softness, and depth. And he chose to meet that with distance, indifference, and pride. Now he's left protecting an image while you're building a life. He holds on to ego because he never learned how to hold on to love. And now it's too late. Peace isn't passive, it's power. People often confuse the quiet choice to walk away with weakness. They see calm as surrender. But the truth is, choosing peace requires more strength than most realize. It means refusing to stay in the chaos just because it's familiar. It means resisting the pull to keep explaining yourself to someone who never truly listened. It's the strength to stop fighting for someone who wouldn't lift a finger for you emotionally, even when your heart still wanted to. There's nothing easy about walking away when you love someone. Love makes us want to fix things, to hold on, to believe that if we just try harder, if we communicate better, if we're more patient, maybe they'll finally get it. Maybe they'll finally show up. But peace is what happens when you stop trying to force what isn't meant for you. It's what happens when you finally realize that being emotionally exhausted isn't the price of love. It's the cost of settling for less than you deserve. You didn't walk away because you didn't care. You walked away because you cared too much for too long, and it stopped being reciprocated. That moment of release, when you stop fighting to be understood and instead choose to protect your energy, that's not defeat. That's growth. That's self-respect. Choosing peace is saying, I am done handing over my well-being to someone who treats my presence like a convenience. He may never understand that. He may look at your silence and think you gave up. But silence is often where healing begins. You stopped responding, not because you didn't have anything to say, but because repeating yourself became painful. You stopped arguing, not because you lost, but because you realized the battle was keeping you stuck. And when you chose peace, you took back your power. The power to move forward, to create space for people who truly see you, and to let go of the version of love that required you to sacrifice your mental and emotional health. That kind of peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from clarity. It's what you earn when you've cried the tears, had the hard conversations, and still find yourself unfulfilled. It's what happens when you start listening to your inner voice again, the one that got quieter and quieter, and every time you silenced it to accommodate someone else's comfort. When you chose peace, you choose boundaries. You chose to no longer chase closure from someone who couldn't even give you consistency. And while he may still be caught up in the need to prove something, defend himself, or rewrite the narrative to protect his ego, you're no longer in that story. You stepped out of the drama. You no longer need to win the argument, because you've already won your freedom. There's a different kind of strength in the person who chooses not to respond to chaos. It's not because they're numb. It's because they've healed. It's because they finally realize that not every conflict is worth their energy, and not every person deserves front row access to their life. You didn't abandon love. You redefined it. You chose the kind of love that starts with you. Calm, grounded, honest. The kind of love that doesn't require losing yourself to keep someone else. And now, while he's still caught in the cycle of push and pull, you're building something better. Peace isn't flashy. It doesn't announce itself with drama or noise. But it's steady, it's strong, and it never asks you to fight for your own worth. Regret hits hard when you realize the door's really closed. For a long time, he assumed you'd always be there. That no matter how inconsistent he was, how emotionally unavailable, how careless he became with your heart, you'd still show up, you'd still text back, you'd still check in, still hope, still stay. Because that's what you always did. And he mistook your patience for permanence. He thought love meant you'd never leave. He got comfortable thinking you'd always be the one to reach out, to fix things, to be the emotional anchor for a relationship he never truly nurtured. But there comes a point when something shifts in a person. When you've begged with your silence, pleaded with your kindness, and made space for someone who kept shrinking themselves to fit into their own excuses. Eventually, the switch flips. And when it does, it doesn't look dramatic, doesn't come with shouting or ultimatums. It comes quietly, a slow detachment, a letting go that feels like peace instead of pain. And that's when it hits him. Because he never really believed you'd stop caring. He assumed that as long as he had access to your heart, he had time. But love doesn't live on a loop. It's not an infinite resource someone can keep drawing from without ever pouring anything back in. And now that the energy is gone, now that the texts have stopped, the door is locked, and there's no longer an audience for his excuses. He feels it. That hollow space where your presence used to be. That's regret. And it cuts deeper when there's nothing left to reach for. He may try to act like it doesn't bother him. He might pretend to be unaffected, caught up in distractions, telling himself he's fine. But the truth is, there's a specific kind of H that comes from realizing someone finally meant it when they said, enough. He might scroll through your old messages, replay your last conversation, search for signs that maybe there's still a crack in the door. But this time, there's not. This time, you didn't leave in anger, you left in clarity. And that's what makes it final. What he feels now isn't just your absence. It's the weight of everything he didn't do. The affection he withheld. The apologies he never gave. The effort he never made. All of it comes crashing in once the option to make things right is gone. And while he sits in that space, finally understanding what he lost, you're not looking back. You're not second guessing. Because when you walked away, it wasn't a move based on emotion. It was based on truth. You gave him time, love, grace. More than most would. And now he's realizing that someone like you doesn't come around twice. Not because you're trying to teach him a lesson or punish him, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that accepted crumbs in the name of love. You're no longer available for almost. For maybe, for someone who only realizes your worth in your absence. And that's what regret does. It shows up late, when the moment to do better has already passed. He's left with the realization that you were never the one who gave up. You were the one who held it together until there was nothing left to hold. And now that you've truly closed the door, he's facing the silence he created. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself more. Healing isn't linear, but it's liberating. There are days you feel strong, grounded, like you've made it to the other side. And then there are days where a memory catches you off guard, a song, a place, or even just the way someone says something that sounds like him, and suddenly your heart aches again. That doesn't mean you're not healing. It doesn't mean you made a mistake. It just means you're human. Healing is not a straight path forward. It's a slow, winding journey where you sometimes circle back before you move ahead again. When you leave someone you loved deeply, you don't just walk away from a person. You walk away from the future you thought you'd have with them. You let go of the imagined conversations, the places you planned to go, the way you pictured your lives intertwining, and grieving that version of your life is part of the process. But here's the powerful part. Every time you choose to sit with that pain instead of running from it, you grow. Every time you resist the urge to reach out or go back just to feel something familiar, you reclaim another piece of yourself. It's easy to romanticize what was, especially in moments of loneliness. You might catch yourself remembering the good days, the way he looked at you when things were still new, the way he held your hand like he meant forever. But if you're honest with yourself, those moments weren't the whole story. They were real, but they were also fleeting. And they don't erase the times you cried yourself to sleep, the way you questioned your worth, or how often you felt like you were trying to be enough for someone who never fully chose you. Healing asks you to tell the whole truth, not just about him, but about yourself, why you stayed, what you needed, and how you lost parts of who you were while trying to keep the relationship alive. That kind of truth is hard. It forces you to confront the ways you ignored your own voice, the red flags you painted green, the comfort you traded for chaos. But it's also what sets you free. You might miss him sometimes. That doesn't mean you should go back. Missing someone isn't the same as needing them. It's just the echo of an old emotional habit, one that fades the longer you choose yourself. The longer you stay in your truth, the more you realize that healing isn't about forgetting him. It's about remembering you, who you were before the pain, and who you're becoming now that you've stopped making room for someone who didn't truly value you. Some days you'll feel the weight of it all. Other days you'll laugh without thinking about him. You'll notice that peace has become your new normal, not anxiety. You'll recognize your worth in small moments, like when you set a boundary and stick to it, or when you feel good just being with yourself. That's healing. That's liberation. It's not loud, it's not perfect, but it's real. And as the days go on, you'll stop wondering if he regrets losing you, because you'll be too focused on not losing yourself again. You'll realize that the life you're building now is worth more than any version of love that asked you to abandon who you are. Healing might take time, and yes, it might come in waves, but every step you take is a declaration that you are choosing peace, growth, and freedom over the past. And that's not just progress, it's power. You didn't need to scream. You didn't need to slam doors, write long messages, or go out of your way to prove your worth. You didn't even need to say much at all, because your absence said everything. Sometimes the loudest message we ever send is silence, not because we've run out of things to say, but because we've realized that saying them doesn't matter anymore. And he's starting to hear that silence now, louder than anything you ever said while you were still trying. When someone gets used to your presence, they start to believe it's permanent. They stop listening closely, stop paying attention, stop showing up with the same energy they did in the beginning. And when you pointed it out, he probably thought you were being dramatic or too emotional. He thought you'd always be around, always trying, always reaching out. But love, it's something you're entitled to. It's something you nurture. And once it's taken for granted too many times, it stops showing up. It stops calling. It stops fighting to be heard. Now that you're gone, now that you're not checking in, not asking how he's feeling, not trying to fix what he wouldn't even admit was broken, now he feels it. That ache in his chest. That's your absence. That's the sound of a door closing that he didn't think would ever shut. And it's not the drama he expected. It's not the messy breakup, the screaming match, the tears he thought would come if you ever left. It's quiet, peaceful, unapologetic. That's what makes it hit harder, because while he's left wondering if he should reach out, wondering why you haven't, wondering if you've moved on, you're not sitting around trying to be heard anymore. You already said everything you needed to say through your actions. You don't owe him more words. He heard them all, and he still didn't change. And now that the words are gone, the space where they used to be is louder than anything you ever said. He's starting to realize what he didn't appreciate while he had it. The way you cared, the way you listened, the way you gave him the benefit of the doubt over and over. And now there's nothing left to push against. No more arguments, no more justifications, just silence. And it's in that silence that he's being forced to confront the reality of what he lost. Not because you told him, but because you stopped trying to convince him. And that's the difference. Your words used to give him something to resist. Your emotional honesty gave him a reason to deflect, to avoid, to pretend like it wasn't that serious. But now, there's no one left to debate, no one to reassure him, no one to remind him what he had. He's alone with his thoughts, with the truth, with the weight of knowing that you didn't need to make a dramatic exit to make your point. You just quietly walked away, and that echo is louder than any goodbye ever could be. Your absence is a reflection of your growth. It's what happens when someone finally decides they're done proving their worth to someone who never really saw it. And now, while he's trapped in his own silence, trying to figure out what went wrong, you're not looking back. Because the most powerful thing you ever did wasn't the moment you left. It was the moment you stopped explaining yourself. The moment you realized that being heard wasn't about how loud you spoke, but about who was actually listening. And once you saw he never really was, you chose peace. And that choice is speaking volumes. So now he's left with his ego and his regret. And you chose peace. You chose yourself. You chose to stop fighting battles that left you bruised and unheard. And while he may still be sitting in the ruins of what he never appreciated, replaying old moments in his head, hoping maybe one day you'll come back, you won't. Not because you're bitter, not because you stopped loving him, but because you finally started loving you more. And that's what this was always about. This wasn't about winning. This wasn't about proving a point. This was about reclaiming your dignity, your sanity, your softness, the parts of you that were never meant to be sacrificed for someone else's comfort. Healing doesn't always come with applause. Peace doesn't always look like a victory parade. Sometimes the quietest decisions are the most powerful ones, and the most profound growth happened when you realize that walking away wasn't a loss. It was the beginning of something better. You don't need closure. You don't need him to understand. Because the real closure isn't in what he says. It's in the way you no longer wait for it. And the real power, it's in the way you've finally stopped trying to be enough for someone who never saw what was in front of him. Now, you're not looking back, because the version of you that stayed for too long has evolved, and the love you gave so freely to the wrong person, you're finally ready to give it to someone who sees it, honors it, and gives it right back. That's peace. That's freedom. That's your power now.